This is Radically Alive Women's Edgecast.
Hello and welcome to Radically Alive Women Edgecast. Jill Natalia.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Great to meet you here. And I'm really curious where this conversation leads. You are another woman that magically showed up in my field through a common connection, through a joint friend. And I had known of you because you are the founder of Red Tent Aotearoa. And I just recently found out that you also founded a red tent in Australia before. I'm excited to find out more about your path or your journey. But before we even dive deeper into any topics, I would like to know, who are you right now?
Right now, I'm a tired mother. I'm perimenopausal, and so I'm awake when most people are asleep and feeling like I need to be asleep when most people are awake. I am incredibly courageous. In fact, I don't really even think about things before I do them. I just jump in. And that has been a pattern throughout my life. And so far it's worked out pretty well. I'm also really, really proud of the humans that I have raised. And so as a mother, I feel, that I can now sort of sit back and just enjoy their company. I'm also a counsellor and a facilitator and a ceremonialist.
Well, I feel so much joy in hearing you own who you are. So this already is an inspiration for women to go like, okay, I am incredibly courageous. I am this, I am that. Like, can you say something about red tents in general and red tents Aotearoa?
Yeah.
I think some people don't actually know about that.
Well, I discovered the red tent from a book that was written back in the 90s by Anita Diamond, and it tells the story of sort of prehistory times, biblical times, of what it would have been like before we lived in houses and towns and cities. And it describes a sisterhood that is not perfect. And these women live together because they have to. And they figure things out. They all come from different backgrounds, they're different ages, and they're raising children together. And it describes how life would have been for women to learn together, to share together, to laugh together, to birth together. And I remembered reading that book when my first child was about 2 and thinking, oh, wouldn't that be amazing? Where is our village? And I had 3 babies in 4 years in a country where I had no family, and I was just craving that deep connection and belonging. And then years later, when I got to Australia and I was pregnant with my 4th baby, I was invited to go to a red tent. And I said, what, do you mean like the book? And I just found the idea so exciting. And I went to this red tent, and there was about 120 women there, and it was a full day. And it was a premiere of a documentary called Stories from the Red Tent, Things We Don't Talk About. And so they showed this documentary, and there was panel discussion, but it was really just women getting together and being. And I knew that I could have walked in and sat next to anyone in that room and had a really honest, authentic conversation. And I don't think I had experienced anything like that before. And so I left that day thinking, oh, when's the next one? And it was a one-off event, and it was traveling around the country from major cities. And it left such a longing in me that I started to Google red tents, and there wasn't any in my area. But coincidentally, there was an online training being put on by Tanishka, the Moon Woman, on Facebook. And I knew her, and I thought, oh, this will be good. So I signed up and I did the online training, still pregnant. And I scheduled my first red tent circle for a month after the baby was due. And so I thought, oh, that'll give me enough time, Well, he had other plans, so he stayed in for a couple of weeks extra. So I had a 2-week-old baby at my first red tent circle, and
Wow.
27 women walked through the door and stared very expectantly at me, who had a baby strapped to her. And years later, when I tell this story and women say, you had a baby that day? Because I had a shawl on, and the baby, he slept the whole time. He must have known. So it was 27 women at the very first red tent circle just sort of staring at me. And I remember closing my eyes and just saying, make me a vessel, whatever these women need to hear to feel the way I felt when, I walked into the red tent. And so I must have said something that was worth listening to, because they all came back, and that was almost 13 years ago. And so I've been holding red tent circles for that long. And with Red Tent Australia, it just grew so quickly. We had women that were traveling over an hour to be there from the Sunshine Coast and down from the northern rivers of New South Wales to be at our red tent. And so we set it up as a non-profit, incorporated association, and we started to train women. And we trained over 100 women, and we opened 72 branches of the red tent all across Australia. Yeah, and I feel tired even thinking about that. So that was, I came back to Aotearoa in 2020, and Red Tent was thriving, and then COVID hit. And so we are slowly, one by one, the Red Tent sort of started to close. There's still a few operating, and I'm still in contact with most of the facilitators over there. And I kind of thought that phase of my life was over. I didn't need it anymore, been there, done that. And I was here for, I think it was about 6 months, and I just really, really missed it. And we were still having online circles, but I didn't know anybody here. And so I thought, you know what, I might start it again. So I applied for a grant, and I got a very small grant, enough to pay for a venue and buy some cushions and buy some food and put some posters up around town. And again, women heard the call. And so it really demonstrated to me that I wasn't the only one that was craving this deep, authentic connection, and that if we put it out there, that people will hear the call. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and there's something in that about you coming from your own necessity. Like, it seems like it came from your heart. It doesn't come from your head. It came from this real deep longing, and that kind of call can be heard.
Yeah. And I think we all are craving this deep connection, even if we're not sure. And there's so many women that come into the red tent and they start to cry, but they don't know why. And it's almost like a remembering, it's fulfilling something that's so primal and so deep inside of them. And because we're so busy and so distracted, we don't sit and just hear other people's stories from a place of not needing to fix or change or give any advice, and just to listen. And sometimes women don't talk at all, and that's okay. They can totally, just observe and be and drink cups of tea if they want. And they're still, enriched and nourished from that connection. Yeah.
Which sounds to me like a real feminine way of holding space, and a real feminine way of allowing whatever is, and to be, basically to be.
Yeah. And letting all emotions come up, whether it's rage or joy and everything in between, it's welcomed. And we don't have to censor ourselves, we can be exactly who we're meant to be. I still don't know of many other spaces that feel as safe as the red tent. And I didn't know what it was to feel safe until I had carefully cultivated this space for me as well, not just for the women that came, because I need it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. I see a parallel to Radically Alive Women, which is beyond the Edgecast, also a context for women to come together and be raw together, to let everything be there as it is. And I love that you have created a field where there's a really clear thread, this red tent as a sacred container, which, if I remember correctly from the Anita Diamond book, the red tent is around the bleeding time. Yeah, women would come together and take themselves out of everyday life and then be with. And
traditionally, traditionally the red tent was a menstrual hut or a menstrual lodge. And so women would bleed together on the new moon. But now, because we have, fluorescent lights and birth control and all the things in between, it's not really focused around the bleeding, but it's certainly a topic that comes up nearly every single time. and it's a safe topic. So when I started to facilitate, I wasn't bleeding because I just had a baby. And it was really obvious to me how much that conversation needed to be had and shared. So in the next couple of years, I became a counsellor and a menstrual educator. I became a grief counsellor and a couples counsellor and a holistic counsellor. And so to be able to see things from all different perspectives and to look at women at whatever stage, whatever age, whatever background they come from as this amazing, so many layers to all of us. And the story that we are coming in with is just today, because who we were yesterday and who will be tomorrow is different. What happened then is I was able to write a training and to see, okay, so women aren't just looking for how to, put their crystals out under the full moon or chart their cycles or, all of this beautiful stuff. It's actually about how to hold space and create boundaries and to make sure that you are not in servitude. We are in service in the red tent. The facilitators are there to hold space, but we are not going to put ourselves last. And so being part of the circle where everyone is equal, but yes, we need to have parameters because it's not a counselling session. That's separate to the red tent. And I have seen so many women's circles, I guess, just fall over or crumble because there haven't been boundaries in place. And the facilitator quite often will represent, the mother in the family structure. And so women will come into these women's circles and project mother and their mother issues onto the facilitator. So I didn't want that to happen in the red tent circle. I wanted the facilitator to be supported as well. And so creating the circles of support for the supporters, that was so important. And to have red tents flourish and thrive and be consistent, because it's a lifeline. And what I see a lot of the time, and it was certainly the case with the first one that I went to, that I loved it. It opened me up, and then there was nothing else. So to be able to make sure that it's solid and that our foundations are firm before we start to overextend, and that we make sure that our cup is full before we can fill anybody else's.
Yeah. Such a common topic amongst women. When you say some more about the topic of boundaries that you shared with me before this conversation, also that you just held a workshop about that, like boundaries, triggers, and truth bombs. Can you say some more about what excites you about that when you found out?
It's such a huge topic, and I think that it's one that we can't ever stop revisiting, because there's revelations at every time I teach this. It's the boundaries, triggers, and truth bombs. It could be, a week-long retreat, because there's so many different ways of looking at it. What I hear time and time again from women is that they don't even know what a boundary is. And they may think that they have really firm boundaries, but what they actually have is a barrier, because they've been hurt. It's almost like a brick wall, and they keep themselves so incredibly safe, but they're not letting anybody in, but they're also not actually able to express themselves because they can't trust. And so that was a revelation of one of the women that was present on Sunday. She said, "Oh, Jill, I thought that I had such firm boundaries because I just keep everybody at arm's length." The thing about the difference between boundaries and barriers is boundaries it's almost like a garden gate that you get to open and close, and you get to say who comes in and who's not. And to have the somatic feeling of, okay, something's not right here, listening to our gut, knowing when our boundaries are, and we actually even know before somebody steps over our boundary, we can feel it if we're tuned in, and recognizing those red flags, because red means stop. It doesn't mean, oh, well, I'll overlook that, probably won't happen again. No, it means stop and reevaluate. And boundaries is another thing that people don't realize, is a boundary is not a boundary unless it is conveyed. And I'm not actually asking anything of you. I'm just telling you what's okay for me and what's not okay for me. So I think that people stop before they actually speak, and they run away. And I call this the runaway bunny syndrome. And that's from a child's book from, I think, almost 100 years ago it was written. And in this book, this little bunny keeps doing sort of things to test the relationship with the bunny's mother. And it's, what about if I do this? Will you still love me? What about if I hide? What about if I run away? And I feel like so many times we want people to come and find us, but we're so scared to say, hey, I'm over here and I'm really looking for love, connection, authenticity, belonging, all of the things. So we hide. And then we get upset because people don't come and find us. And of course, that's a really basic analogy, but in our lives over and over again. And that's when we build up barriers rather than boundaries. And so for me, encouraging women to say the things that they know will not be well received. And of course, the people who are closest to us, our family of origin, are the hardest ones to put boundaries in place with. And just because you've been in a relationship with someone for 20, 30, 40, 50 years doesn't mean you can't put boundaries in place. And so many people just settle and say, oh, well, that's just the way it is, until they've had enough. And then they leave. And not saying that that's not the right thing to do, but sometimes conversations can prevent these things. Yeah.
Yeah, that links in with an observation that I know of myself and women I work with, is that it's like, okay, if I haven't set the boundary for like once or twice or three times, I'm trapped in, okay, now I have to I can't change my mind, I just have to go along.
Yeah.
And then it's like this a track that you're on and you're not daring to shift.
Yeah. And that's just a choice. And I think that giving women and everybody permission to change their mind many, many times a day, because we are different every day. So what my capacity is today versus yesterday, today I have more energy and I can see more clients and I can answer more messages and hold space for people. Yesterday I needed to take a nap, so I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether that's a boundary or whether that's just communication, to be able to get better at saying the things and disappointing people and using no as a full sentence, because sometimes we just have to say no, and people would rather say nothing than no. And I love clarity. I can't figure out vagueness. It's sort of the human mind, not just mine, but everybody, the human mind will automatically go to the worst case scenario, and especially if we've had traumatic childhoods. Oh, this must mean, that something terrible has happened, or they're angry, or I've offended them, or whatever, if we don't have the facts. And so if somebody just says, no, I'm tired. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just really, that is probably the basis of a lot of the work that I do, especially in the facilitator training. And it's the least pleasant of all of the days of the training, but it's also the one that women experience the most growth and revelation.
That brings us to this place of comfort zone. Yeah, like beyond the comfort zone, at the edge is where growth can happen, where change can happen, where transformation can actually occur. And I heard you say also before we started this recording that you actually, what did you say? Something like, actually, at the edge is where you feel most comfortable, or something like that.
I always thought I was a bit defective in that way, and I don't know whether that was just because I've been traveling most of my life and living in very uncomfortable situations, that where most people feel comfortable, I feel uncomfortable. I couldn't have a 9 to 5, 40-hour work week. There's no way that I could sit in an office and play nicey nice, and I'm a bit of a disruptor, especially in board meetings. And I always want to hear from the person that is speaking the least in big meetings and corporate settings. The people usually who have the most to say are the ones that I find are not really speaking authentically. And so for me, where most people feel very uncomfortable, self-employed, not knowing from one day to the next what's going to be happening, working with people who are, mostly have given up. A lot of people that come to see me have a lot of suicidal ideation. I work with people who have been turned away from all other, mental health facilities and resources. I work with people who are just starting out in new ideas. My business mentor / consultant, which I actually hate that word, but but yeah, so I work with people who really they don't fit in anywhere else, but I know that they need support and help, and I can always see that flame, that little spark that needs to be fostered, and it's where I feel most comfortable, is where most people feel uncomfortable. And I don't really know why, other than the fact that I've been uncomfortable for most of my life. So, yeah.
Well, and I guess that this is also like the difference to the comfort zone, or this like no longer being able to tolerate something that's not aligned with what's the force that's coming through you. That's the image that I get. It's not so much that you can't stand uncomfortable, but it's this like there's a force coming through you that is actually cannot be, like, you can no longer suppress it, something like that.
That is so true. Yeah, thank you. I think because after I had my fourth baby, I did not want to be in the same situation that I had been in the past. I had 3 children in America, and I just felt so out of place, and so like I was swimming upstream the whole time. And I knew that I needed to create the environment that I needed to be in. Otherwise, the wheels would have fallen off the bus again. And I had very bad postpartum depression with my first 3 children. And I thought, the same thing's going to happen if I don't create a community that can support me. And that is why the Red Tent started. Not just that I was lonely, it was that I was scared of really losing, everything that I'd had. And so I needed to make sure that I went out of my comfort zone to create this community. Yeah.
And what I get from that is really that you didn't do it to save the other women. Yeah, it's like you did it out of your own necessity, and then it's natural that you create something that is of benefit to the others. I find that really.
And I was so surprised that there was more than 2 or 3 people there to have so many women come into the room, not just the first time, but it's consistent over the last 12 years. I think my courage or authenticity is a beacon for them, that if I can do it, then they can do it too. Yeah.
Yes.
That's my hope. Yeah.
Yeah. And another aspect that I want to just pick up from what you shared about women coming to you, or not, you didn't say just women, maybe it's also men, but suicide, like people that have suicidal thoughts. And I'm getting more and more also thanks to a friend that calls them people that are suicidal, like the canary in the coal mine. Like they're not the problem. They have something for the community at large. It's like, because they don't fit in. Like when we're not fitting in, we're the ones to be creating the new structures, to creating the things that we're missing in this world, just like you have done with the Red Tent. And when we don't have the support to see that, we, especially women, tend to look at themselves and want to take themselves out, like this rage against, like, instead of being able to set the boundary going against yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's a process. It's a process into having all of these thoughts and feelings and negative experiences, and then it's a process out of that coal mine. And we can't expect women to do it by themselves, or anybody to do it by themselves. They need I call myself a sacred witness. And so I'm not what people call a coach or an interventionist. I never suggest things, or you should do this, or have you tried this. That's not the way I work at all. I believe that everybody has the solutions or answers, or just questions inside themselves. And so holding space and just really putting some parameters around what this is and what this isn't, for people to know that, everything's welcome here, not just in the Red Tent, but in my counseling sessions. And it's amazing what will come up if you just let it. If I get out of the way and just let people start to have ideas, and then I just gently encourage a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think, yeah, it's incredible, the ideas that come up. Once we can clear the negative thoughts, it's incredible what then wants to be birthed. But until you have the space, it's just, yeah. And it takes time. I think we are in this era of instant gratification and communication and likes on Facebook and all of that stuff. And none of that matters. Which, yeah, it's so hard for people to go against what is the norm. And that's another place that I feel incredibly uncomfortable is social media. Self-promotion, I find it gross. But it feels that how do people find you unless you put yourself out there? And so that's something that is really a struggle for me, is being on the digital forums. Yeah.
Well, I've been following this guy he calls his business Marketing for Hippies. I don't know whether you've heard of him.
No.
And he has a lot of free material. He has some really great stuff on there. And one thing he says is that it is absolutely natural for humans not to be able to promote themselves. So this is not a fault. We're wired for this connection where it's so much more powerful if I have experienced your service or your spaces and then I tell everybody about it. It's so much more efficient than if you'd say the same things. And that's not to say that, especially as women, we can't like own the greatness of what we do and the greatness of who we are. I find that also extremely attractive when someone actually owns that. But it's really actually, this is how human culture works, is that this gossip, the gossip of telling each other about things is how information gets relayed, how curiosity is born. And so, yeah, I hear you. And I think there's also some wisdom in that.
There's a process that I teach called I'm Wonderful. And it actually comes from the movie The Wizard of Oz. I'm not sure if you remember this. The wizard comes into town with this big hot air balloon. And of course, we've now got Wicked, so it's even more central in my heart. So he comes into town with this hot air balloon and he crashes it. And all these little, they're called munchkins, come out and they think he's magical and he's wonderful. And they call him the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And he sort of looks around because he doesn't think of himself as wonderful because he's a bit bumbling and stumbling and he's just crashed his balloon, been blown off course. And he says, wonderful. They think I'm wonderful. So that means I'm wonderful. And then it turns into this whole thing. And so from day one of the Red Tent, I have been helping women, almost offering them a platform to promote whatever it is that they do, whether it's an art project or yoga or meditation or whatever it is that they do. And I tell them they're wonderful, and then it's much easier for them to think of themselves as wonderful, and that really, it helps the other women, I think, to find their voices, and especially when I share why I think they're wonderful and how our paths crossed. And there's just this amazing thing that happens when women are seen for their passion, and they really light up. And so that's really the structure of the Red Tent Circle, is that we celebrate a woman each month for being wonderful in whatever she does. And I especially love to have guest speakers that have not had a big audience or have maybe shied away from the public eye, but they do amazing things. And as a business mentor, I help women make money, because when women make money, they do really good things with it. Men too, but women especially. And women help other women when they make money, and they keep their money locally. And there's so many women that have come into the Red Tent that are now running successful empires, not because of the Red Tent, but I think that it has helped them along the way. And so the success stories are just, it's such an honor to be able to watch them and be a part of them in some small way. Really, really makes me smile.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a topic that's very alive for me also, this topic of women owning also their money generating skills and just like offering their services for money and not give it, like we're so trained to give everything away. And I think there's a big shift happening already, and also necessary for everyday grassroots level women.
And for women, that's another boundary thing. So many women want to give away their gifts for free. And the facilitator training used to be very, very low cost. And people were like, wow, I've just done a training that was, 5 times the price of this. And it wasn't even quarter of like what you're doing here. And it was so hard for me to actually start to charge for my services. It took a while before I realized, and then, when you start to own that money story, so many things fall away.
Wow. Could have a whole another episode on that topic. But yeah, I mean, coming towards the end of this conversation, what would you, if a woman wanted to learn to honor her boundaries, but she comes up against her fear of that or her inner mechanisms, what would you suggest she does, like as an experiment or as an exercise, like a practice? One thing.
Yeah. Well, there's some really practical ones, and it's a sentence, and it's a I statement. I feel when you, and what I need is, just some really practical statements that you can just practice in the car or practice with people and say, hey, I need to set a boundary with my mother-in-law or my partner or my child or whoever it is, my boss. And this is the situation. And getting comfortable with saying the words, that's practice. But the other one is, I think, energetically feeling out where our energy and ends and begins, and pulling it back and making sure that we feel safe in our own bodies. Somatically, so many women are either in their heads or that they're just not in their bodies at all. We have left the building, so to speak. And so, of course, yoga and meditation and all of these things, but really just sitting and breathing and feeling all of the edges from the tips of your toes all the way up to the crown of your head. Where do you begin? Where do you end? And then extending that out a little bit and then bringing it back in. So, yeah, definitely there's some practical things, but also somatic as well. I think it's a balance of both.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your findings, or at least a taste of it. And women can find you. I'll link your website, Red Tent Aotearoa website. And do you have any offers come up that you want to invite women to?
Oh, gosh. Well, we've got a lot of circles. We have 2 circles a month here in Aotearoa, Christchurch. There's red tents opening all over the country. There's one opening in Auckland next month. There's one opening in Motueka in October. We've got Dunedin in Invercargill. And so they're opening all over. So I just encourage women to find a red tent. And if there isn't a red tent near you or near wherever they're listening from, then maybe consider coming and becoming a facilitator. We run the facilitator in March, a facilitator training in March, and it's residential. So you become part of a village for 4.5 days, and the bonds that happen over those days are bonds for a lifetime. And these women are, part of a village, and it's a beautiful thing to become a facilitator, to hold space. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. See you. I hope to see you in person someday. And goodbye.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.